Before we really grind down to 2024, you mentioned the name Ryan Day. I mentioned Alabama. So I don't know how much cross sectional
Mm.
conversation that you hear out there versus possibly being a little bit more isolated with your Georgia fans uh, and your podcast and so forth. But I'm just a bit curious, considering the way those, we will call them national championship games. One was a de facto national championship game of
Yep.
sorts, and of course we know Ohio State had a 2-score lead. Marvin Harrison gets knocked out. It's an extremely close game. They miss a 50-yard field goal. Year before, Alabama's got a lead with 4 or 5 minutes left. They throw, they blindside Stetson Bennett, score that touchdown. It looks like they're going to win the national championship. And of course, he comes back and pulls it
Mm.
out, and Georgia gets the pick six to ice it. But no John Mechie. Jamison Williams lost during that game as well. How many Georgia haters do you hear from, whether it be from those two fan bases or just that, hey, you guys get a little bit lucky in 21 and 22?
Oh my gosh. We have learned. I did not know. Ohio State Buckeye fan. I did not know. And if you're listening to this, look, I'm a Georgia homer. I'm a fan. When people come on the podcast and like, you're just a homer, I'm like, you're dang right. Like, I love doing this podcast because I love being a fan of Georgia. Of course I'm a homer. It just so happens that I'm able to give some insight to it because I actually do know a thing or two about football. But I am a fan and we talk like fans. But man, Ohio State has just come out of the woodwork in recent years. And it's this Midwest. I lived in the Midwest for a hot minute. The Midwest pride is so deep out there in Ohio State and Michigan. There's this sense of just prestige when you talk of their programs, and so we have a good laugh. We try our best to poke fun at Urban Meyer, the chancellor of integrity, and how he's not. We make fun of that, but we also give credit. Man, I think Ohio State. We did a whole episode talking about if Ohio State doesn't win it this year, is Ryan Day on the hot seat? And we had an Ohio State fan in the comments saying, yeah, actually, he doesn't win a championship. I'm scratching my head and I'm wondering, is this the dude? Because they have the most talent. I actually would probably rank them preseason number one because of the talent. Quarterback, question marks everywhere, but running back, they got 1A, 1B. Defense is loaded. They got a number of transfers that are just going to hit. Question comes down to quarterback play. But we're here an Ohio State Buckeye fan quite a bit. Alabama fan is our favorite. Because they will tell us constantly when we talk, when we even utter just historically talking about, hey, we won back-to-back national championships. They say, hey, that's in the past. We're here to the future. And I go, okay, great. Let's talk about the future. They want to raise an SEC championship banner. And Daniel and I are on a record of saying in the post BCS and now in the college football playoff format, SEC championships are not banners that we want to brag about. We want to brag about national championship because the playoff is the gauntlet that's there. And so we do get a good laugh at Alabama coming at us talking about the SEC championship. Be like, we sincerely don't care. We want trophies. We don't want the banners. And so those two teams are huge haters. And surprisingly enough, Clemson fan. We've had a couple. This is now, we're going to have another kickoff to the season. A couple of years ago, we had the kickoff season. This year, we're going to have the kickoff season against Clemson. And man, there's some pride there. And it's a rivalry that's renewed and stoked again. So we hear lots of hate from those three fan bases quite a bit.
Well, let's stay on that, Clint, because at the point that I grew up, that Clemson Georgia game was played every season.
Yes.
And then we got a taste of that about 10 or 12 years ago. Mark Richt, Dabo Sweeney playing back-to-back games, and they split those two games. Really good football games. And then a couple of years ago, you mentioned Georgia having not the defense this past season that they had, of course, that 21 standard. Dabo Sweeney doesn't want to be reminded, but he's going to have to be reminded all off season and going to have to dig into the tape to see what they can possibly do against this Georgia defense. That game, of course, was a rock fight. It's funny how things changed so quickly that JT Daniels was, of course, the leader of that unit. And then here they are, 3 months later, winning a national championship with a different quarterback, the guy that everybody kept saying, yeah, not him, anybody but him. And he just kept coming back. And then DJ Oyangale is, of course, off to 3 different schools in the span of 3 seasons. So just very interesting. But again, it was that pick six that was the difference. It was a 10-3 game.
Yes.
And here we've got Clemson again. I think most college football observers would give Georgia a pretty strong nod here. I think they're probably a preseason 10 or 11 point favorite, something in that range.
Yep. Yeah, it started, I think, 9.5 was the very opening line, and it's bumped up double digits. And for Clemson, it's just going to come down to their best players are on the second and third level on the defensive side of the ball. Their best players on the roster for Clemson are not on the offensive side this year. And Cade Klubnik is not a quarterback I would trust with my team going in. It's really funny. You could talk about talent, and you mentioned Georgia's quarterback quandary. Every single Georgia fan, don't tell me that you weren't this person, because we all were, did not want Stetson Bennett. And it's insane to me because Daniel and I talk all the time. He is the best college football player in Georgia history. He will go down. He won back-to-back national in every college football game he played. He was the MVP. It's insane to say that out loud. If you take the name Stetson Bennett off that, you just put that out there, everybody say, well, of course, if he's an MVP of every game, he's the best player in 2 national championships. For Clemson, it's going to be interesting because I saw that point favorite. I was like, oh my gosh, no, that I don't like that. It makes me feel all sorts of ick. I saw the rock fight. I saw that pick 6. We were there in the stadium watching that game, and it was a slugfest. My gosh, those trenches were popping. We could hear it all the way up in the stands. Now we come to this year. I think Georgia does have a leg up. I think the defense has vastly improved for Georgia this year. Defensive back is, again, question mark. But Clemson just doesn't have the dudes on offense anymore. I don't think. I don't see wide receiver. Running back, they might have a dude coming back. He down the back half of the season did some pretty good, remarkable work. Average, I think he got like 600 yards in 4 games or something like that. So he's impressive, linebacker, edge, DB, impressive for Clemson. But I think they're not going to score enough points. So if I'm going to give Georgia 14 points, it might be 14-3 again in this kind of opening season. That might be it. I anticipate it more like 21-10. And so, yeah, that point spread seems about right from what I'm thinking so far.
We're talking some Georgia football. Of course, you might as well start at the top. We got Clint here from Locked On Bulldogs. You can catch his podcast. And what's the best way to track your work and what you guys have going on there at Locked On?
Yeah, follow us over on Twitter. We interact quite a bit over there. That's our favorite place to engage, interact, message, dogs podcast. Get on over there. Follow us. We are on YouTube and as well as an audio podcast every single day. Come season, we're going to do after game shows and recaps. And during the off season, we're asking all sorts of questions of roster management. But the Twitter is the best place to interact with us. And that is actually us interacting with you and doing that over on Dogs Podcast.